On my wedding night, as I bled in our bed, my husband smiled and said, "This is how you tame a woman." For years, I lived in silence until I discovered the secret that would destroy that man forever. Hello, my dears. It's so wonderful to be here chatting with you today. My name is Elizabeth Thompson Wilson. I'm 78 years old, and I live here in Williamsburg, Virginia, a beautiful little town full of history and good people. I was born in a small town called Oak Ridge in West Virginia, but fate brought me here many years ago, and I ended up putting down roots among these historic streets. These days, my greatest pleasure is taking care of my little antique furniture restoration workshop. Would you believe that these old, wrinkled hands still have the skill to bring life back to pieces that people no longer value? It's like therapy for me. I take those chairs, dressers, and tables that nobody wants anymore, all damaged by time, broken, and patiently, day after day, I sand, glue, varnish, until they shine like new again. I started this work after my children were grown. A neighbor had an old rocking chair that belonged to her grandmother. It was completely broken down, and everyone said it would be easier to throw it away and buy a new one. But I knew the sentimental value of that piece. I asked her to let me try, even though I'd never done anything like it before. I spent weeks studying, watching videos, asking advice from old Mr. Johnson at the carpenter's shop. When I delivered the restored chair, my neighbor cried with emotion. From there, word spread, and one piece led to another. I'm here in my little corner now, surrounded by tools, sandpaper, varnishes, and pieces of wood. I'm finishing a coffee table for Mrs. Patterson. It belonged to her great-grandmother, can you imagine? This little table is over 100 years old. People bring me not just furniture, but entire family histories. Before I continue with my story, I'd like to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying listening to me, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps this grandma keep sharing her stories with more people. And tell me in the comments, what town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or late in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take a little time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. You know, while I restore these pieces of furniture, I often think about my own story. How life also broke me, hurt me, but also restored me. Today, I want to share with you a difficult part of my life, something I've kept for many years. About a marriage that wasn't for love, about pain, about bitter discoveries, but also about how I found the strength to rise again. Because just like these old pieces of furniture, we too can be reborn from our wounds. I was born in Oak Ridge, West Virginia in 1947, in a simple house with a tin roof at the foot of the mountains. My father, Arthur Thompson, was a quiet man who worked in the coal mines, always coming home with his face stained with black dust, looking like one of those mountain spirits from old folklore. My mother, Eleanor Wilson, was a seamstress who insisted on keeping up appearances. "We may be poor, but we have to be clean and proper," she always said. There were 4 of us children. Me, the oldest, then came Ernest, Claire, and little Jimmy, whom God took when he was still small with yellow fever. Our house was simple, but full of life. The yard was large, with a cherry tree that gave the sweetest fruit in the region, a chicken coop where I helped collect eggs every morning, and a crystal-clear creek that ran at the back. How we played in that creek. We made little boats out of bark and raced them to see which would reach the bend faster. My father said that creek was blessed, that its waters came straight from the sacred mountains of the ancients. I woke up early, even before the rooster crowed. I helped my mother light the wood stove, where she prepared delicious cornbread with fried eggs and fresh brewed coffee. Afterward, I went to Oak Ridge Elementary School, carrying my notebooks wrapped in brown paper, because a backpack was a luxury we didn't know. On my way back, I still found time to play hopscotch with my friends Zelda and Teresa, daughters of Mr. O'Malley, who owned the general store. My mother had big dreams. Unlike most women of that time, she could read and write well, having studied through what they called junior high. She always said, "Education is the only thing no one can take away from you, my daughter." But behind that beautiful speech, I perceived something else. Mother had a thirst for social advancement that not all the coal in West Virginia could satisfy. She observed the women she sewed for with a mixture of admiration and envy. She wanted the same jewelry, the same dresses, the same life. When I was about 10, I began to notice how Mother dressed me differently when visitors came, especially if they had sons. She forced me to wear starched dresses that itched my skin, tied my hair so tight that I got headaches. "Straighten that posture, girl. Smile more, but don't show all your teeth. That's vulgar," she would whisper through clenched teeth while squeezing my hand. The worst was when Dr. Allendale arrived, the town doctor, with his son Clementine, a chubby boy with red cheeks, who always looked at me in a way that gave me chills. "Don't be silly, Elizabeth," Mother would say after they left. "Clementine is going to be a doctor like his father. He's a good catch." My father noticed what was happening, but rarely interfered. Once, however, I overheard an argument between them. "Eleanor, the girl is still a child. Let her live her childhood," my father argued. "A child? She's becoming a young lady. If you don't prepare the ground early, she'll end up like Sebastiana's daughter, married to that drunk who doesn't have a penny to his name," my mother responded, with that cutting voice that didn't admit any argument. It was around this time that I noticed a change in my mother's gaze. It was no longer the look of a mother to a daughter, but of someone evaluating merchandise. She began to constantly talk about good matches, making a good marriage, securing the future. My little girl's body was beginning to show the first signs of change, and I felt as if I were in a showcase, waiting for the highest bidder. At 12, something happened that deeply marked my life. One May afternoon, during the spring festival in Oak Ridge, Mother dressed me in a light blue dress all embroidered, which she made herself, and took me to the town square. "Important people from the capital are here today," she whispered, adjusting my hair for the 1,000th time. That's when I saw him for the first time. Gerald Bradford Montgomery, a rancher from Williamsburg, a middle-aged man who looked at me with those eyes. Oh my goodness, I still get chills remembering. Eyes that undressed me, that devoured me, that reduced me to nothing. That night, I heard Mother enthusiastically telling Father, "Did you see how Mr. Montgomery looked at our Elizabeth? A man of means, landowner in Williamsburg, widowed and childless. Imagine the opportunity." My father replied something I couldn't understand, his voice muffled by the door. But I didn't need to hear to know that once again he wouldn't have the strength to stand up to my mother. From that day on, the name of Gerald Bradford Montgomery began to be mentioned frequently in our house. And I, a girl who still played with dolls in secret so as not to be scolded for childishness, felt a growing fear, a presentiment that made my heart tighten every time that name was spoken. The years passed, but Gerald Bradford Montgomery's name never left our house. Every few months, he would appear in Oak Ridge on business and always managed to pay us a visit. He brought expensive gifts, fine fabrics for my mother, imported cigars for my father, and for me, delicate jewelry that Mother kept in a small box, saying I could only wear them at the right time. When I turned 15 in 1962, Mother organized a modest party, but she went all out on my dress. She sewed day and night a pink satin model with lace at the hem. Of course, Gerald was invited. That night, while everyone was dancing in the living room, he asked to speak to me alone on the porch. My heart raced with fear, but Mother pushed me outside with a forced smile. "Elizabeth, you're becoming a beautiful young lady," he said, his breath heavy with tobacco and whiskey. "You know, on my ranch in Williamsburg, I have everything a woman could desire. Big house, servants, jewelry. All that's missing is a lady to run it all." His large, calloused hands gripped my wrist tightly, while his eyes ran up and down my body. "Soon I'll talk to your father about us." I went back inside, trembling. I found my mother in the kitchen and between sobs told her what had happened. I expected consolation, protection. I received only a cold, calculating look. And what's the problem? Gerald is a man of means, respected. He can give you a life that I never had, that your father could never give me. But mother, he's old enough to be my father. And I don't like him. He looks at me in a way that... I couldn't finish the sentence. The slap came quick and sure. Don't be ungrateful. Do you think marriage is like love stories? It's an agreement, a business. If you want to live on love, you'll end up starving. Is that what you want? Her eyes gleamed with anger. Besides, he's an experienced man. He knows how to treat a woman. He's not like those silly boys your age. That night, I cried myself to sleep. In the months that followed, Gerald's presence became more frequent and more threatening. On one of his visits, he brought a different gift, a small portrait of himself, which Mother insisted I place at my bedside. For you to get used to the idea, she said, in that tone that didn't allow for discussion. My father, always so quiet, one night came into my room. He sat on the edge of the bed and was silent for a long time. Daughter, he finally began, his voice as low as ever. I know your mother is pushing this marriage. If you don't want... He didn't complete the sentence. He squeezed my hand and left, leaving in the air a vague promise of protection that, deep down, we both knew he couldn't keep. A week later, I found my father crying in the yard, hidden behind the chicken coop. Dad, what happened? I asked, frightened. He quickly wiped away his tears. Nothing, daughter, I'm just tired. But his eyes told another story. Years later, I discovered that that same week, Gerald had generously paid off all the debts my father had accumulated at the mine, after an accident had left him off work for months. Shortly before turning 17, the inevitable happened. On a stifling January night, Gerald came to dinner at our house with a notary. Between the chicken and dumplings and the apple pie dessert, he officially asked for my hand. My mother smiled like she had never smiled before. My father stared fixedly at the empty plate. My siblings were uncomfortably silent. And me? I was petrified, as if my soul had left my body and was observing everything from a distance. I'm building a new house in Williamsburg, especially to receive my young wife, announced Gerald, helping himself to another glass of whiskey. It will have all the comfort that a fine young lady like Elizabeth deserves. That night, I tried one last time. I knelt at my mother's feet, begged, cried. Don't force me to do this, Mother. I'm afraid of him. She lifted me forcefully, her eyes hard as stones. It's your chance to have a good life. Learn to please him. That's what I did with your father. It's what all women do. But what does that mean, Mother? What happens after the wedding? I asked, genuinely not understanding what awaited me. She lowered her voice. He's a vigorous man. Everyone in Williamsburg knows that. He brags about his attributes. She paused. It will hurt at first. We all go through it, but you get used to it. And then come the children, and the pain has a purpose. The wedding was set for April 1964. Gerald wanted an ostentatious ceremony to show everyone his prize. In the 3 months of engagement, he visited our house frequently, bringing fabrics for my dress, trousseau, furniture for the new house. With each visit, he became more possessive, more controlling. When you're my wife, you won't wear that lipstick. You look like a loose woman. Or, that loose hair isn't for a respectable lady. In town, people commented. Some envied my luck in marrying a rich man. Others looked with pity, knowing the rumors about Gerald's temperament. My friend Teresa, the only one who dared to speak openly, warned me. They say his first wife died under strange circumstances, Lizzie. Be careful. When I tried to ask my mother about this, she cut off the subject. Gossip from envious people. His wife died in childbirth. It happens all the time. The wedding day arrived like a death sentence. The church was decorated with white lilies, which reminded me of funeral arrangements. My dress, although expensive and elegant, weighed like armor. Gerald, at the altar, displayed a triumphant smile. Throughout the ceremony, I felt as if I was being sold, delivered, sacrificed. At the reception, held at Gerald's ranch on the outskirts of Williamsburg, where we immediately moved, he made a point of showing off his young wife to all the guests. "Look at this wildflower I found in Oak Ridge," he would say, gripping my waist with unnecessary force. Among the guests, a group of older men, friends of his, exchanged looks and complicit smiles that made me even more terrified. As the night progressed, Gerald drank more and more. His eyes became glazed, his voice louder, his gestures more abrupt. Near midnight, he announced in a loud and clear voice, "It's time to take my little bride to learn what a real man is." A round of coarse laughter followed the announcement. My mother took me to the bridal suite, helped me change from the wedding dress to a white silk nightgown. Her last words before leaving me were, "Close your eyes and think about the family you'll build. The pain passes, the money stays." I was left alone in that huge room, sitting on the edge of the bed, trembling like a leaf in the wind. The laughter and music from the party still echoed in the distance, but they seemed to belong to another world. The world I knew, imperfect as it was, had ended, and what would come next was a complete mystery that filled me with dread. I don't know how long I sat on the edge of that bed, listening to the sounds of the party diminish outside. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed suspended, as if the world was holding its breath along with me. When the door finally opened, the strong smell of whiskey and cigars invaded the room even before Gerald entered. He staggered slightly, his tie loose around his neck, the first buttons of his shirt already open. He locked the door behind him and looked at me in a way I will never forget, a mixture of triumph and hunger that made me shrink even more. "So my little wildflower is finally mine," he said, his voice slurred from alcohol. "You know, all those men down there are jealous of me now. They know what I'll have tonight." He approached, unbuttoning the rest of his shirt. "Prepare to meet a real man." What happened that night? It wasn't love. It wasn't union. It was brute force. Every time I close my eyes, I can still feel that crushing weight on me. Hear my own screams muffled by the pillow he pressed against my face so that no one would hear the crying of a spoiled girl. When it finally ended, he turned to his side and fell asleep almost instantly, snoring loudly. I remained motionless, feeling the throbbing pain course through my entire body. The sheet, once white as snow, now stained with red, a silent witness to my suffering. The next morning, I could hardly walk. As I got ready in the bathroom, looking at the purple marks that were beginning to appear on my arms, I heard knocks on the bedroom door. It was my mother, who had stayed at the ranch to help me get settled. "So, daughter, how was it?" she asked, entering the room without waiting for an answer. Her eyes ran over my swollen face from so much crying, my cautious walk, the stained sheets. For a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps? But it passed too quickly. "That's just how it is the first time," she said, helping me change the sheets. "Get used to it. Big men are like that. At least he's rich." Those words sealed my loneliness. I understood that I was completely alone in that particular hell. In the days that followed, I learned the routine of the ranch. Gerald maintained dozens of employees, working with the cattle in the fields, in the big house. But no one looked me in the eye. The women especially averted their gaze when they saw me, as if my situation was contagious. Only Martha, the oldest cook, dared to direct words of comfort to me when we were alone. "Miss needs to be strong," she whispered, as she served me chamomile tea on mornings when I could barely get out of bed. "All the women in this house have suffered, the former mistress too." Little by little, I began to piece together the story of Gerald's first wife. Her name was Eunice, daughter of a tobacco merchant from Richmond. They married when she was 20, and for 7 years they tried to have children without success. Gerald blamed her publicly, humiliating her at social events, calling her a barren mule. When she finally became pregnant, after painful and humiliating treatments, Eunice died during childbirth. The baby also didn't survive. The doctors said she was too fragile, Martha told me one afternoon, as we prepared preserves. But those of us who lived here knew the truth. She couldn't take it anymore. Her body gave up after so much suffering. My life as Mrs. Montgomery followed a predictable and terrifying pattern. During the day, I managed the house, always under Gerald's watchful eye, who criticized every decision of mine. At night, he demanded his marital rights with the same brutality as the first time. "It's to widen you," he would say with a sadistic smile when I cried in pain. "A woman needs to be ready to birth my son." Gerald's obsession with having an heir soon became evident. Each month, when my bleeding came, his anger increased. "Are you useless like the other one too?" he would shout, throwing objects around the house. "Maybe the problem is with these modern women, too weak to carry a real child." After 6 months of marriage, he began taking me to doctors in Richmond. I was subjected to invasive and painful examinations, always with Gerald present in the room, discussing my body as if talking about a breeding mare. "She seems normal on the outside, doctor, but something doesn't work right in there," he would say without any shame. All the doctors said the same thing. There was nothing wrong with me. I was young, healthy, perfectly capable of conceiving. An older doctor, Dr. Mitchell, even discreetly suggested that Gerald should also be examined. The reaction was explosive. "Are you questioning my masculinity?" he bellowed, grabbing the doctor by the lapel. "Anyone in Williamsburg can attest to what I have between my legs. The problem is with her, for sure." We left the office in a hurry, with Gerald dragging me by the arm. In the car, his silence was more terrifying than his shouts. When we arrived at the ranch, he locked me in the room for 2 days, without food, only water that Martha managed to pass to me in secret. My isolation increased every day. I couldn't write to my family. All letters passed through Gerald's scrutiny. The rare visits from my mother were supervised, with Gerald always present, showing off his happy wife and the prosperous home he had given me. Behind the forced smiles and expensive jewelry, I was withering like a flower without sun. In town, Gerald made a point of showing me off at social events, always introducing me as my young and beautiful wife. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple, the respected rancher and his elegant wife. No one saw the marks under the long-sleeved dresses. No one heard my muffled screams during the night. Over time, I learned to disconnect, to let my mind wander far away while my body endured the unbearable. I imagined myself back in Oak Ridge, running by the creek, climbing the cherry tree. Or I projected myself into a future where I would be free, where I would have a voice, where I would not be anyone's property. On our first wedding anniversary, Gerald organized a big party at the ranch. He invited all of Williamsburg society, my family, his rancher friends. He had a very expensive emerald green dress made for me, imported from New York City. "To hide that sickly thinness of yours," he commented. "People will think I don't feed you properly." During the party, I smiled mechanically, accepted congratulations, danced when requested. My mother, dazzled by the luxury, didn't stop praising Gerald, commenting on how I had moved up in life. My father, increasingly aged, just hugged me for a long time without saying a word. In his eyes, I saw that he knew, or at least suspected, the truth behind the facade. It was that night, when everyone had already left and Gerald was too drunk to look for me, that I found a small moment of peace on the back porch. Looking at the stars, so bright in the dark sky of the countryside, I promised myself that I would not die on that ranch. I would not end up like Eunice, a name whispered in corners, a sad story that no one had the courage to tell openly. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I would find a way out. There had to be a way to escape that nightmare. And as long as that possibility, however remote, existed, I would continue breathing, continue enduring, continue living. The second year of my marriage to Gerald was even more suffocating than the first. His obsession with an heir transformed into paranoia. I was forced to follow a rigorous diet elaborated by a healer he brought from a distant Appalachian community. I drank bitter teas 3 times a day, took herbal baths that burned my skin, and had to sleep in specific positions after his nightly visits. One afternoon, while Gerald was in town, I found Martha crying in the kitchen. The old cook rarely showed emotion, so I approached, concerned. "What's wrong, Martha?" She quickly wiped away her tears. "Nothing, miss. It's just my rheumatism." But when I insisted, she finally confessed, "It's been 10 years today since Miss Eunice passed." That aroused my curiosity. "You liked her very much, didn't you?" Martha looked around, making sure we were alone. "She was an angel on earth, miss. She suffered as much in his hands as you do, perhaps more. In the last months, when she finally managed to get pregnant, he seemed calmer. But what, Martha?" She hesitated. "There are things it's better not to know, miss." That night, I couldn't sleep. Martha's unfinished words hammered in my head. What did she know? What else was there to know about Eunice and her tragic end? The next morning, taking advantage of Gerald having gone to a cattle auction in Lynchburg and wouldn't return for 3 days, I began to search his quarters, something I would never have the courage to do if he were nearby. In the office, rummaging through old papers, I found a locked metal box. Using a hairpin, as I had learned from my brother Ernest in childhood, I managed to open it after several attempts. Inside, there were documents, photographs, and letters. Letters written by Eunice to her sister in Richmond, letters that obviously were never sent. With trembling hands, I began to read them. Each word was like a mirror of my own suffering. He accuses me of being barren, but refuses to consult a doctor himself. When I suggested that perhaps the problem was with him, he threw me against the wall with such force that I fainted. The last doctor suggested a procedure to unblock my tubes. The pain was indescribable, but Gerald insisted that I take nothing to relieve it, saying that the pain would make me stronger for childbirth. I'm finally pregnant, but I'm so afraid, not for the birth, but because I don't know if I want to bring a child into this hell. What if it's a boy who becomes like his father? What if it's a girl condemned to suffer like me? The last letter, dated just a week before her death, froze my blood. "Dear sister, if something happens to me, please investigate. The family doctor is in Gerald's pocket. He says my pregnancy is progressing normally, but I feel that something is wrong. I have strange pains, bleeding. When I mention it, Gerald says it's nonsense, that I want attention. The tea he insists I drink every night has a strange taste. Yesterday I threw it away when he wasn't looking, and I spent the night without pain for the first time in weeks." I dropped the letters, horrified. What was Eunice insinuating? Could it be possible that Gerald— No, it was unthinkable. Even someone so cruel wouldn't do that to his own wife, to his own child. I continued searching in the box and found at the bottom a sealed envelope addressed to Gerald. The seal of Virginia Medical Center in Richmond indicated something official. I opened it carefully so as not to tear it, so that I could seal it again without him noticing. It was a medical report dated 1955, about 2 years before his marriage to Eunice. The document was full of technical terms, but one phrase jumped out at me, clear as day. Confirming complete and irreversible sterility due to complications from bilateral orchitis resulting from mumps in childhood. My heart raced. Gerald was sterile. Completely sterile, always was. He could never have children, and he knew this even before marrying Eunice, before marrying me. All the cruelty, all the accusations, all the humiliating treatments to which we were both subjected, all based on a lie. A lie to protect his male pride, his reputation as a virile man of which he boasted so much. As I digested this shocking revelation, I heard the sound of horses approaching. Quickly, I put everything back in the box, except for a copy of the medical report that I hid inside my bodice. I closed the box, put it back in place, and left the office, my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. From the window, I saw Gerald dismounting from his horse. He had returned earlier than expected. My mind was working frantically. What to do with that information? If I confronted him directly, he would certainly deny everything, and then... I didn't even want to think about what would happen after. I needed a plan. That night, while serving dinner to Gerald, he seemed especially irritated. The auction was a waste of time. Those hicks don't know anything about quality cattle. He took another sip of whiskey. Any news around here? Nothing, sir. Just the usual routine. He looked at me suspiciously. You're acting strange. What are you hiding? Nothing, sir, I swear. I tried to appear as natural as possible, but my hands trembled slightly. Gerald suddenly stood up, knocking over the chair. You're lying. I can see it in your eyes. He grabbed my arm so hard that I let out a scream. What did you do while I was away? Who was here? No one, sir, I swear. Tears began to stream down my face. Maybe you need a reminder about who's in charge here. He dragged me to the bedroom, throwing me on the bed. What followed was the worst night since our wedding. The discovery of his secret seemed to have made him even more brutal, as if somehow he knew that I knew, or as if he was taking out on me the frustration of his condition that he tried so hard to hide. When he finally fell asleep, I could barely move. Every inch of my body hurt, but the physical pain was almost welcome, as it helped distract from the pain in my soul. Looking at his face in the dark, so serene in sleep despite the monstrosity it harbored, I made my decision. I wouldn't end up like Eunice. I wouldn't die on that ranch, a victim of the cruelty of a man whose greatest concern was hiding his own inadequacy. The next morning, when Gerald went out to inspect the ranch, I dragged myself to the kitchen. Martha let out a horrified sigh when she saw my condition. My Lord in heaven! What did he do to you, miss? Martha, my voice was just a whisper. I need your help. The old cook looked around, nervous. Miss, I can't. If he finds out. Please, I begged, for Eunice. At the mention of the former mistress's name, I saw resolution form in Martha's eyes. What do you need? First, tell me everything about Eunice, everything you know, and then... I need to find a way to get out of here. Not to run away, I quickly added, seeing the panic in her eyes, but to prepare something. During the following hours, Martha told me dark details about Eunice's final years. How she too had found the medical report, how she had confronted Gerald, and how after that her health had mysteriously begun to deteriorate. How the teas he insisted she drink to strengthen the baby coincided with her worst episodes of bleeding. How the family doctor, completely under Gerald's influence, ignored all signs that something was wrong. She died with the baby still in her womb, concluded Martha, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. The doctor said it was eclampsia, but we in the house knew. We knew there was something wrong with those teas. When she finished her account, I asked, "Why did you never report this? Why did you keep working for him after everything?" Martha lowered her eyes. My whole family works on his land, miss. My grandchildren, my nephews. He would destroy us all. And who would believe? The word of a black cook against one of the most powerful men in Williamsburg. I understood perfectly. Gerald's power extended far beyond the walls of that ranch. But I had one thing that Eunice didn't have: physical proof of his condition. And more importantly, I had time. Gerald didn't suspect that I knew his deepest secret. In the weeks that followed, I began to plan carefully. With Martha's discreet help, I managed to send a letter to my brother Ernest, who now worked in Richmond. I didn't tell everything, just enough for him to understand the gravity of the situation. I asked him to discreetly investigate Gerald's medical past and, if possible, the case of Eunice's death. Each day was torture, pretending normalcy while carrying the knowledge that could destroy everything Gerald most prized: his public image as a virile, potent man capable of generating a legacy. At social events, when he boasted to his friends about soon having an heir for the Montgomery lands, I smiled docilely, while inside I boiled with rage and disgust. 3 months after the discovery of the report, I finally received a coded response from Ernest, hidden inside a cake he sent as a belated birthday present. He had managed to confirm Gerald's medical condition with a former hospital assistant. More alarmingly, he had discovered rumors about Eunice's death that corroborated my suspicions. The doctor who had certified the cause of death had received a piece of land from Gerald a few months later. It was all I needed to know. My decision was made. I wouldn't flee like a criminal. I wouldn't disappear in the dead of night. I would destroy him, just as he had tried to destroy me, using the only weapon he truly feared: the truth. The opportunity I had been waiting for came faster than I imagined. Every year, in May, Gerald organized the Grand Harvest Festival at his ranch. It was the most important event on Williamsburg's social calendar, when ranchers, politicians, merchants, and their families gathered to celebrate the prosperity of the Montgomery lands. For Gerald, it was the perfect moment to display his power, his wealth, and of course, his young wife. Preparations began a month before. Gerald personally supervised every detail, from the menu to the decoration. "This year will be even bigger," he announced during dinner. "The governor has confirmed his attendance, and the bishop too." His eyes gleamed with the prospect of impressing such important figures. For me, he had specific orders. "I want you dazzling. Have the most expensive dress made that you can find in Richmond. Everyone should envy what is mine." The way he spoke of me, as property, once deeply hurt me. Now, it only fueled my resolution. As the party approached, I carefully refined my plan. I needed copies of the medical report, enough to distribute among the most influential guests. With Martha's discreet help, I managed to send the original document to my brother in Richmond, who made several copies and returned them hidden inside cans of homemade preserves, supposedly sent by our mother. The week before the party was one of frantic activity at the ranch. Extra cooks were hired, decorators came from the capital, musicians rehearsed in the great hall. Gerald walked around the property like a peacock, displaying his feathers for anyone willing to admire him. "This year I have a special announcement to make," he commented to one of his foremen, loud enough for me to hear from the porch. "I think Mrs. Montgomery is finally expecting my heir." I froze upon hearing those words. It was a lie, of course. I knew it was impossible. But what was he intending with that? Was it just another of his fantasies to keep up appearances, or something more sinister? I thought of Eunice, of her mysterious pregnancy that ended in tragedy. A chill ran down my spine. On the eve of the party, I received an unexpected visit. My brother Ernest, whom I hadn't seen since my wedding, arrived at the ranch with a gift for the grand event. Gerald, always suspicious of my family, observed our interaction closely, but could not refuse entry to a brother-in-law who came to pay his respects. "Are you all right?" whispered Ernest, when we managed a brief moment alone as I took him to see the gardens. "No," I replied simply. "But tomorrow everything will change." "I'm afraid for you, Lizzie," he said, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in so long. "This man is dangerous. The rumors in Richmond—" "I know exactly how dangerous he is," I interrupted. "That's why I need to do this. Not just for me, but for Eunice too." Ernest discreetly squeezed my hand. "I brought what you asked for, and more. I managed to contact Eunice's brother in Richmond. He'll come to the party tomorrow, although Gerald doesn't know it. You'll have someone by your side when everything happens." That night was the longest of my life. Lying beside the man who had destroyed my youth, I planned every word I would say, every gesture I would make. There could be no mistakes. This would be my only chance. The day of the party dawned clear and bright, as if heaven itself approved of my plan. I spent the entire morning preparing, not just physically, but mentally. The dress that Gerald had ordered was a deep emerald green with details in gold lace, the colors of the Montgomery lands. Symbolic, I thought with irony, that I would use his colors to destroy him. The guests began to arrive in the middle of the afternoon. The elite of Williamsburg and surroundings, all in their best clothes, bringing expensive gifts and fake smiles. Gerald kept me by his side like a trophy, introducing me to each newcomer with possessive pride. "My Elizabeth is radiant today, don't you think?" he would say repeatedly. "Perhaps it's a special glow of someone carrying a new life." The curious looks and polite smiles that followed this comment made me boil inside, but I kept my expression serene and modest. When the governor arrived, accompanied by his wife and advisors, Gerald practically abandoned me to give total attention to the highest authority in the state. It was the moment I took advantage of to discreetly meet my brother, who handed me a small package. "Are you sure about this, Lizzie?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," I answered, storing the package in the hidden pocket of my dress. The party was in full swing when Gerald asked for silence to make his annual speech. At my side, he raised a glass of imported champagne and began to talk about the prosperity of the ranch, about God's blessings, about the strength of the Montgomery family. "As you know, my friends, a family needs strong roots and abundant fruits to prosper," he said, his voice resounding through the hall. "That's why it's with immense joy that I would like to announce that soon we'll have a new member in the Montgomery family. My wife, Elizabeth, is expecting our first child." A buzz of applause and congratulations filled the environment. Smiles, pats on the back, glasses raised in a toast. I remained motionless, my smile frozen, while inside a volcano was erupting. It was now or never. "Would my husband like me to say a few words?" I asked docilely, extending my hand for the microphone. Gerald hesitated for a moment. I rarely spoke in public, but then smiled condescendingly. "Of course, my dear. Everyone would like to hear from the future mother of the Montgomery heir." I took the microphone and took a deep breath. The entire room was silent. All eyes turned to me. From the corner, I saw my brother Ernest, and at his side, a man I recognized from photos I had seen. Arthur, Eunice's brother. Both nodded discreetly, giving me courage. "First, I would like to thank all of you for your presence at this special party," I began, my voice surprisingly firm. "It truly is a day of important revelations." Gerald smiled at my side, clearly satisfied with my apparent docility. "My husband has just announced that I'm expecting a child, the heir to the Montgomery lands," I continued, feeling Gerald's gaze on me, increasingly suspicious of my tone. "But there is a problem with this story." A heavy silence fell over the hall. I saw Gerald's smile falter. "The problem," I continued, opening my purse and removing copies of the medical report, "is that my husband, the powerful Gerald Bradford Montgomery, has been completely sterile since his youth." I handed the first copies to the closest people, who looked at them with astonishment and began to pass them on. "This is a medical report from Virginia Medical Center from 1955, confirming complete and irreversible sterility due to complications from mumps in childhood. My husband has always known that he could never father a child." Gerald's face completely transformed. Red rose to his face, his eyes widened with fury and humiliation. He tried to snatch the microphone from my hand, but I quickly moved away. "This man," I continued, my voice now louder, amplified by the anger contained for so long, "not only lied to me, but also to his first wife, Eunice. He tortured her for years, accusing her of being barren, subjecting her to painful and humiliating treatments, and when she finally became pregnant—" "Shut up!" roared Gerald, advancing in my direction. But it was too late. Copies of the report circulated around the room, and I saw the exact moment when they reached the hands of the governor and the bishop. I also saw Arthur, Eunice's brother, approaching with a determined look. "When she finally became pregnant," I repeated, my voice trembling but determined, "something happened. something that caused her and the baby to die, something that perhaps had to do with the teas he insisted she drink every night. A horrified murmur ran through the crowd. I saw some of the older ladies who had known Eunice bring their hands to their mouths in shock. Gerald's face was a mask of fury and panic. "Elizabeth, you've gone mad!" he shouted, trying to take control of the situation. "This is absurd, a slander! Someone take that microphone from her!" No one moved. Everyone looked between me, Gerald, and the copies of the report that now circulated from hand to hand. "I'm not crazy, Gerald," I responded calmly. "I'm just tired of living in silence. Tired of suffering for your lie, for your sick pride. And I'm sure I'm not the only one." At that moment, Arthur stepped forward. "My sister Eunice also suffered at the hands of this man," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I always suspected that her death was not natural. Now, I'm certain." Gerald looked frantically around, like a cornered animal. "This is a conspiracy. You're all against me. That document is fake, fabricated by enemies who envy my lands." Dr. Anderson, a respected doctor from Richmond who was among the guests, took one of the copies and examined it carefully. "This document seems authentic, Gerald," he said gravely. "The format, the letterhead, Dr. Kavanaugh's signature, everything corresponds to the standards of Virginia Medical Center from that time." "It's a lie!" bellowed Gerald, knocking over a nearby table. Glasses and plates shattered on the floor. The governor, visibly embarrassed, made a gesture to his advisors and began to discreetly withdraw. Other guests followed his example, moving away from Gerald as if his shame was contagious. I felt my brother Ernest's hand on my shoulder, giving me silent support. Gerald, realizing he was losing control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "Elizabeth," he said, lowering his voice, trying to sound reasonable. "Let's talk about this in private, dear. You're confused, embarrassing yourself and me in front of our friends." "I have nothing more to say in private, Gerald," I replied. "I've lived too long in the shadows, with fear, with shame. Now everyone knows who you really are. A man who built his reputation, his marriage, his entire life on a lie. A man who would rather see innocent women suffer than admit his own inadequacy." The word hung in the air like a sentence. For a man like Gerald, whose identity was so deeply tied to his supposed virility, it was the final blow. I saw something die in his eyes at that moment. Not the physical man, but everything he believed himself to be, everything he had built. His reputation, his respect, his power over others, especially over me. Everything crumbled like a house of cards. Without saying anything more, Gerald turned and staggered out of the hall, leaving behind the deafening silence of his public humiliation. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Aided by my brother and the lawyer he had secretly hired, I filed for an annulment of the marriage, citing fraud. Gerald had married me knowing of his condition, unable to fulfill the primary purpose of matrimony at that time, to bear children. Williamsburg society, once so subservient to Gerald, now avoided him like the plague. Rumors about the possibility of him having poisoned Eunice gained strength, especially after Arthur managed to exhume his sister's body for new toxicological exams. The results were not conclusive after so much time, but raised enough suspicions for a police investigation. Gerald's business began to crumble. His friends distanced themselves, business partners canceled contracts, banks refused new loans. In a few months, the great rancher was on the brink of ruin. As for me, with Ernest's legal support and Martha's testimony about the mistreatment I suffered during the marriage, I managed not only the annulment, but also a considerable portion of Gerald's assets as compensation. I didn't want his money. Much of it was donated to charities in Williamsburg. But I needed resources to rebuild my life. After the trial, I received an unexpected proposal. Arthur, Eunice's brother, had become my friend during those difficult months. He owned a small antique shop in the historic center of Williamsburg and offered me a partnership in the business. "You have a good eye for beauty and value," he said, "and I believe that staying in Williamsburg would be a way to show everyone that you won, that you don't need to run away." I accepted the offer. There was something liberating about remaining in the city where I had suffered so much, but now, as a free woman, respected mistress of my own destiny. Little by little, we transformed the small shop into a thriving business. I became known for my ability to restore antique pieces, returning life and beauty to objects that others would consider lost, irretrievable, a perfect metaphor for my own journey. As for Gerald, the proud rancher who once reigned over Williamsburg with his reputation as a virile and powerful man, ended his days as a shadow of what he was. After losing almost everything in legal proceedings and failed businesses, he took refuge in a small property on the outskirts of the city, living as a recluse, avoided even by former employees. One day, about 2 years after that fateful harvest festival, I learned from Martha, who still maintained contact with some people from the old ranch, that Gerald had suffered a stroke. Alone in his house, with no one to help him, he lay fallen for hours until found by a passing worker. I didn't feel joy at the news, but neither did I feel pity. Just a strange sensation that a cycle had closed, that justice, not revenge, had finally been done. My life moved forward. The antique shop prospered. I became a respected part of the community, and a few years later, I met Anthony, a widowed professor who came to Williamsburg to research colonial architecture. Our love blossomed slowly, built on mutual respect, honesty, and kindness, everything that was lacking in my first marriage. At 32, when I had already given up on the possibility, I discovered I was pregnant. Anthony cried with joy upon finding out, and 9 months later, we welcomed our son, David. Later, 2 more children came, Sarah and Michael, our little miracles, as Anthony called them. And so, through pain and courage, I found what Gerald, with all his power and possessions, never achieved: a true family built on love and truth. And here I am, at 78 years old, in this workshop full of antique furniture, waiting for a second chance. Each piece I restore reminds me a little of my own story. I see a chair with torn upholstery, scratched wood, and think, this one can still be fixed. Because I learned, my dears, that almost everything in life can be fixed if we have patience and the right tools. Williamsburg truly became my home over these decades. The cobblestone streets, the historic buildings, the colonial houses, all this now is part of who I am. My Anthony left 8 years ago after almost 50 years of marriage. It was a quiet love, without storms, one of those that grow like trees with deep roots, silently, firmly, giving shade and fruit. Our children followed their paths. David, the oldest, became a doctor and lives in Richmond. Sarah followed in her father's footsteps and is a history professor at the State University. Michael, our youngest, has a bed and breakfast right here in Williamsburg. All gave me wonderful grandchildren, 7 in total, who fill this house with joy when they come to visit. The antique shop transformed over the years. After Arthur passed away, about 20 years ago, I took over the business alone. Gradually, I specialized in restoring pieces rather than selling. I started almost by chance, fixing a rocking chair that no one else wanted. I discovered I had a talent for it, and more importantly, I discovered that it healed me inside. Each piece I restore tells me a story. This broken cabinet witnessed family dinners. This worn dresser stored baby clothes of infants who are now adults. This dressing table with the cracked mirror reflected the faces of brides on the happiest day of their lives. I restore to them not just physical beauty, but also dignity, the possibility of continuing to be useful, of carrying their stories forward. Many people in Williamsburg know me as Miss Elizabeth the Restorer. The younger ones have no idea about my history with Gerald. The older ones, who might remember, respectfully avoid touching on the subject, and that's fine with me. I no longer carry that past as a burden, but as a part of my story that shaped me, that taught me to value truth, freedom, and genuine love. My routine today is peaceful and filled with small joys. I wake up early, have my coffee watching the birds in the yard. Then I come to the workshop and work on my pieces until lunch. In the afternoons, sometimes I receive visitors, longtime friends, clients who became friends, my son Michael and his family who live nearby. On Thursday nights, I play cards with my girlfriends, a group of ladies as full of stories as I am. On weekends, when the weather permits, I like to sit in the central square and observe the life of the town. The children running, the couples in love, the tourists enchanted with our colonial architecture. It's like watching a spectacle of life, knowing that I've been part of that scenery for so long. From time to time, I still receive news from the past. I heard that Gerald died many years ago, alone, in a nursing home in Norfolk. He never remarried, never recovered his fortune or his status. For a time, after his stroke, he still maintained the small property on the outskirts of town. He lived like a ghost, rarely seen, commented on only in whispers. When I learned of his death, I did something that perhaps many wouldn't understand. I went to the cemetery and left flowers on his grave. Not out of love or forgiveness, some wounds are too deep to completely heal, but out of gratitude. Because paradoxically, it was through that pain that I found my strength, my voice, my true life. In a sense, Gerald was like one of those pieces of furniture that arrive at my workshop completely ruined. His soul was so damaged, so deformed by lies and pride, that there was no possible restoration. But from his wreckage, I managed to salvage something beautiful for myself: freedom, strength, and eventually the ability to truly love and be loved. Life has taught me that people are like these antique pieces. Some can be restored, others are too damaged, some are worth the patient effort, the meticulous care, others are like rotten wood, which crumbles at the touch. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference, and in understanding that not all furniture, not all people, were made to last. My Anthony was one of those rare pieces made of noble wood, built to last for generations. His absence still hurts, but I am grateful for the years we had. I see traces of him in our children. I hear echoes of his voice in the laughter of our grandchildren. And so, he remains present, like those antique pieces I restore, transformed, but still carrying his essence. Now, in my peaceful nights, when I sit on the porch of this house in Williamsburg, the same one we bought more than 40 years ago, I feel a peace that I never imagined possible. I look at the stars, so bright in the country sky, and I thank for each step of the journey, even the most painful ones, because each one of them brought me here. And here, my dears, is exactly where I should be. My dear ones who have accompanied me this far, I want to share with you some things I've learned in my 78 years of life. Things that perhaps can serve as comfort or guidance for those who are going through difficult times. If you are living in a relationship where there is no respect, where there is control, humiliation, or any kind of abuse, be it physical or emotional, know that this is not love. True love builds. It doesn't destroy. It elevates, doesn't diminish. It liberates, doesn't imprison. It took me years to understand this. Years to realize that I deserved more, that I was worth more. Many times we accept unworthy situations because we've been convinced that we don't deserve better, or because we're afraid of the unknown, or simply because we don't see a way out. But believe me when I say, there is always a way out. It may not be easy, it may not be immediate, but it exists. Just as I found mine, you will find yours too. I learned that silence can be both a prison and a tool. For a long time I stayed quiet, swallowed my tears, hid the marks, physical and emotional. But when I finally found my voice, when I broke that silence, it was like breaking the walls of a prison that I had helped build myself. When I look back at that 17-year-old girl forced into a marriage she didn't want, I see that even in the darkest moments, a part of me never completely surrendered. Like those noble woods I work with today, which may be scratched, faded, even broken, but which keep at their core a strength, a beauty that no one can take away. We are all like that, resilient by nature, capable of rising from the ashes, of transforming pain into wisdom. As I say to my clients when they look suspiciously at a piece of furniture seemingly beyond saving, the value is not in what you see now, but in what this piece once was and what it can still become. How many times have I felt like one of these discarded pieces of furniture without value? But life has its own plans for us. Like an antique piece that carries marks of history, we too carry our scars. They don't diminish us. On the contrary, they tell our story. They witness our strength. When I restore a piece, I don't completely erase its marks. Some of them are part of its identity, its unique character. The same happens with us. It's not about forgetting the past, but about giving it new meaning, transforming it into something that strengthens us, not diminishes us. I also learned that sometimes we need to reach our limit to discover our true strength. It was at the moment when I thought I couldn't take it anymore that I found in myself a courage I didn't know existed. As an old American saying goes, rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. The truth, my dears, is a powerful weapon. While I lived in lies, both the one imposed on me and the one I imposed on myself, I lived only half a life. It was by embracing the truth, however painful it might be, that I finally liberated myself. If you are going through an abusive situation, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, please don't stay silent. Seek help. No matter what country or city you are in, there are people and organizations ready to support you. Talk to someone you trust, a family member, a friend, a professional. Don't carry this burden alone. Remember, your value is not defined by another person. You don't need anyone's approval to be worthy of love and respect. As I always tell my grandchildren, your value is within you. No one can take it away unless you allow them to. And if you know someone who may be living in an abusive situation, extend your hand. Sometimes all we need is to know that we're not alone, that someone cares, that someone believes in us. Be that someone. Anywhere in the world, respect for human rights and dignity are universal values. No one has the right to humiliate, control, or hurt another person, regardless of culture or tradition. Together, as a global community, we can make a difference for those who suffer in silence. And to you who have followed me this far, who patiently listened to the stories of this old restorer, my sincere thanks. If something I shared today touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. It's through these real-life stories that we can touch other lives, transform other realities. Do it now, not just for me, but for all those women who, like me, needed to find their voice. Also leave in the comments the word restoration, so I know who really followed this story to the end and understood its true message, that all of us, like antique furniture, deserve a chance to be restored, to shine again. As a restorer of furniture and of my own life, I can assure you, there is no piece so broken that it cannot be fixed, no story so painful that it cannot be rewritten. Mine was. Yours can be too. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales. I read all your comments and would love to know what town you're watching from and what time of day you found this video.